Welcome back. Today is a big day. We are going to be welding the spindle gussets on these spindles, taking apart the old spindles, putting new bearings in these, and putting it all back together. Stay tuned. Okay, so first things first, we've got a pair of spindles here that came off of my 4Runner when I straight axled it. They've been cleaned up. We've got these Total Chaos spindle gussets. Since these are stripped apart and they're ready to go, we're gonna go ahead and weld those gussets on and then get them prepped. And while they're painted and the paint is drying and curing, we're gonna go ahead and take apart our old ones down here. There they are. Take apart our old ones, press them apart. Realistically, the only things that we need out of them is the like wheel flange that has the studs and everything that goes onto the axle shaft. So we need to press those out of the old ones. And then I've got a box of parts over here. In those parts is new bearings, new seals, all that type of stuff that's gonna go in these fancy new painted ones when we get them done. So these spindle gussets go on kind of goofy. They're not really that intuitive how they fit on the spindle itself. Let me show you how they actually go on. So this guy with the holes facing the back side of the spindle assembly, it goes, this little notch goes right here, and then these flats up here at the top line up with this edge and this edge on your spindle, and then that curve kind of goes in that curve there. So the first thing we're going to do is slap this on here. We're going to mark out on the spindle everywhere that's going to be welded on this, and then we can grind that surface clean. That way we get a nice hot weld into this spindle, and hopefully we don't get any cracks in the future. Take our paint pen, and then we'll do the back. Dude, my freaking paint pen just ran all the way down this thing. Okay, now that we've got our area marked out, we're gonna go ahead and grind that clean. Okay, we got our work pieces cleaned up. We're gonna go ahead and get this tacked on. We'll tack both of them on, and then weld one out, weld the other one out, and get these things painted. Something I wanna do before I get too far into this is I wanna double check that the upper control arm, the uniball bolt that goes through here, is actually going to clearance before I weld this on. So it's a good idea to check that stuff when you're early on in the stages. Here's our upper control arms. These are Solo Motorsports upper control arms. Okay, so here's our first little issue. We need to make sure that we're able to work around this. Okay, this puck goes in here like that, and then gets a snap ring in the top. So what we need to do is kind of get this thing placed where it'll stay, and then put our gusset up here and see where it clears, so we can still put this in after we weld this. I just want to make sure in the future that if I have to take this out, I can still get this out. Okay, that's the first one tacked in. Looks pretty good. There's clearance for everything. I can still get this in here, which is great. It's tight, but it'll still go in. So now we're gonna do the other one. This side was having a little trouble fitting. This bushing just simply did not want to pop in. For having a little trouble fitting cylindrical components, these little sand wheels that you can stick, it's like a flap wheel. You can stick them in a drill or a die grinder, make a world of difference. You'd be surprised how fast that makes these things fly together. Just like that. I'll do a full video on welding later, explaining the ins and outs of welding and MIG welding in particular, since that's most of the time what's being used on projects like this. But for now, I'm just gonna weld these things out. A good thing to do if it's cold in your shop and you're welding something that's cast, even if it's cast steel, go ahead and take your torch. You guys probably all have one of these kicking around the garage. If you have an oxyacetylene torch, it's even better. It's just faster. Take your torch, and we're just gonna preheat the cast section of this to a couple hundred degrees. I mean, as long as it's over about $180, then you know that all the moisture is sweat out of that material, and that moisture is not gonna be sweat into your weld while you're welding. As you're doing this, you can actually see the moisture coming out of the steel as you're heating it up. It's a common misconception and wives' tale that the moisture is from the torch gases itself. Steel is actually very porous. It may not seem like it, it may be hard to believe, but steel has a ton of grains to it, and in between a lot of those grains is space that moisture can get in. That's where the moisture comes out of when you heat it. Preheating this before you weld will also help reduce the amount of warping that happens during the weld process. This will also help burn off some of the oils that may be on it from whatever you've been doing. Okay, well, while those spindles are cooling, we are going to start working on taking the old spindles apart. All right, first things first on this guy, let's get the seal off of here, and then we can get to that snap ring behind it. Safety glasses. Booyah! Okay, we're getting ready to press these. There's a lot of videos on doing front wheel bearings. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I'll show you guys kind of the basics, so you don't really have to hunt around for videos. But if you want more information, they are out there. What we're going to be doing is these plates, which I'll show you in a second. They're going to be sitting in between your wheel mounting surface and this dust plate here. There's a surface in here that the plate is gonna basically be putting the pressure. Pull this out of here. This is the pressing setup. There's a 4x4, a 1-inch by 4-inch plate. They're by 12 inches long. And then these ones go kind of on the outside of that. And then that wheel mounting surface will sit down in here. and the back side of that plate will sit on the edges of these plates here. These are bearing race locking collars off of the rear end of any normal Toyota standard axle. These work great as kind of spacer blocks to help push this down. Now don't be alarmed if you're pressing, and it just seems like it's not gonna go. There's a lot of tension holding that in there. So keep pressing, you'll hear a loud bang, that's when it breaks its tension, and then you should be able to just keep going from there. Just a piece of DOM tube. There it goes. Now the clip that I had mentioned earlier, the C clip that I had mentioned earlier that we're trying to get to, that we need for the new spindles and to put the new bearings and stuff together, is behind this seal. That's why we had to press this hub assembly essentially out of the bearing. We can get this off, we can get to that clip. Now if you're reusing everything, you're gonna be pulling this stuff out, replacing the bearings and putting that clip back. We're just putting them in our new gusseted, not rusty spindle assemblies. So we'll pop this seal off of here and then we'll get that C-clip out. I'm gonna put this in a vise, make it a little easier. Okay, right here is the bearing, the inner bearing, and then there is that C-clip in there. It might be kind of hard to see, but that's what I'll be working on next, is pulling that out. Now, because we pushed that hub assembly out of the bearing is actually putting pressure, applying pressure on that clip. So in order to get that clip out, we're just gonna tap this bearing back in a little bit. That'll give us access to that. Now that we've beat that bearing in a little bit, you can see the C-clip actually moves freely. That's what we want. Once it moves freely, then you can just take a pair of needle nose pliers and pull this thing out. Just like that. And if it's flat, not too warped, you can reuse it. That's the goal. All right, it would seem that our spindle assemblies are cooled down. Now, if you don't want a bunch of spatter on your project as you're welding it, I highly recommend getting this stuff called anti-spatter. You can spray it on what you're gonna be welding and then weld through it, and none of the spatter, the little dingleberry metal balls from when you're welding, will stick to your workpiece. If you don't have that, like I unfortunately do not, a paint scraper, a regular, this isn't a super expensive one, but it's a decent paint scraper. A decent paint scraper will take off dingleberries pretty freaking easily. We're gonna go ahead and get these cleaned up, and then get these things painted. All right, we're gonna spray these down with brake cleaner, get them ready for paint. You can also use acetone, mineral spirits, whatever you really want to clean your workpieces before paint. All right, we got our spindles hanging from the rafters, which I will also be hanging from later if these don't dry. We're gonna get them painted up with some semi-gloss black and let them sit, and then we'll put our new bearings in. All right, so now that these things are painted up, took a couple days for it to dry, but they are dry and they are ready to rock and roll. Let's go ahead and get them assembled. We'll get them on the press our bearings in, put our seals in, and then we'll work on our drive flange, hub, whatever you want to call it. Get that cleaned up and painted and put on here as well. And then these are ready to go back on the car. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to be installing is our wheel bearing. There is an in and there is an out on this. As you can see, one side has this black plastic. That's going to go on the inside. And this side has metal. That's going to go on the outside. So when I'm referring to inside and outside, the part that either faces out away from the vehicle or the part that faces in towards the vehicle. This is my current press setup. I've got a 4x4 on each side, the 1x4 steel plates here, and then two stacked up on top of each other here to set this on top of. Then we'll put the wheel bearing in here. We'll put a plate, we'll press that in. That's how the setup is for this. By the way, this is a great hack. If you've got grease in a tin, a little foam brush, get in there, grab some grease, and you could paint it onto your surface. Set that down there, take our bearing, position our bearing in place. Now I'm gonna take these 1-inch plates, and this is just to raise this up. It's not necessary to press the bearing, it's just so I don't have to move the press as far. Okay, once that's pressed flat, we'll go ahead and we'll pull this stuff off. Okay, now you can see that the bearing is flush with the outside. A trick you can do, if you have a bearing cup, you can put a bearing cup on here. If you have the old bearing, you can use the race from that bearing to push this in the rest of the way. So here's the old bearing, without the bearings in it, just the race. We'll set that right there. Our other plate, these guys. And now our outer bearing, our wheel bearing, is pressed into place. So the next thing we're gonna do is install the snap ring back into the front now that the bearing's pressed all the way down. Needle nose pliers. Just like that. And then our outer bearing, this big bearing, and then our outer seal, this big seal right here. Make sure you tap around the edges not to damage the seal. Now this seal is a little bit of a mystery to me. Normally, when you have a seal that is on a rotating surface, there's a seal surface for that edge to kind of sit on as it spins. This one's different. It like sits flat against a surface and is supposed to seal it from debris. You know, if you drive through water, this keeps water from getting into your wheel bearing. So it's kind of a strange seal to me. I'll show you what I mean. So this seal right here, you would think this surface, there would be something on here that this surface would sit up against like that. Maybe even this edge right here, this lip. But that's not the case. This is way wider. This actually sits flat, flush like this, up against right here. That surface. There's no ridge here. It's just flat. And unfortunately, that surface is extremely marred up from rust and time. So I don't think this is gonna make like the best of seal. I don't really want to put silicone in here because silicone is gonna get rather hard over time. I'm gonna take a little bit of this red and tacky, and I'm gonna put a little bit of red and tacky around the inside edge of this, just to hopefully give it a little bit more water resistance. All right, we've got a little bit of a bead of grease around the inside there. Hopefully, if any water does get past the seal, hopefully the grease helps in some way. It's really the only thing I can do. The seal is pretty anemic. It's pretty small. So we'll see. We'll see. If it doesn't work, we're doing wheel bearings anyways. So it's worth trying. It's worth experimenting with. Okay, our hub assembly, our spindle assembly or wheel assembly here, it's got a lot of that old gasket on it and a lot of rust. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and clean that up. I'll run a wire wheel over it first. And then I've got this 3M kind of abrasive rubber pad. We'll run that over too. Okay, look at that. Shiny, looks great. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna press our hub into our spindle assembly, into our bearings. Same press setup as before, with the only difference being one more press tool. And that press tool is this. This is basically just a cup that is bigger in diameter than the back of this. And that is going to help support our bearing from the backside as we press the hub assembly in through the bearings. Stack a couple of plates in here. Okay, you heard that final pop. It was a little bit higher pitch than the rest. That is it, fully seating. Okay, and the last things that are going to be going in this are the ABS ring with the open side, the hollow side facing up. That just drops over like that. Then our locking collar, there's a beveled side and a flat side. The bevel side faces up. And then the last thing is our inner seal, which we'll put that on in just a second. This retaining ring, this collar, this locking collar that holds the ABS in, you can press it in, but it's not a very tight fit. You can actually just take a hammer and tap it around in a circle, and it'll just kind of work itself in pretty easily. If yours is a bit stiffer, you can use a brass punch or even a copper punch. Just like that. The seal is directional. You really can't put it in the wrong way. If you try to put it on backwards, it obviously doesn't fit. The biggest thing you want to remember is you want to tap it in here along this edge and not hit the rubber. It'll help to probably put a little bit of grease around the outside before you start. We'll go ahead and we'll get this started by tapping around the edges, and then we'll finish it off with a punch. And now that seal is completely installed, and this spindle is ready for paint. After paint, looks like this and is ready to go on. Look at how nice that looks. Guys, that is gonna do it for us today. In the next episode, we are going to be installing these guys and a few other parts that you're gonna wanna see. So stick around, stay tuned, hit that like and subscribe. Get down there in the comments, let me know what you guys wanna see. Let me know if you like the project. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Out.